I don't know if Brian's told you this or you know this, but professionally, this is one of the most challenging jobs I've ever had because I'm following one of the greatest salespeople in the United States. Brian occupied the position that I now occupy before I got it. So could you imagine following that act in any context? It's a difficult thing to do. I've never been in sales in my life. I have been blessed in the state of Tennessee, and I'd like to say something about Nashville to plug the community. It's fantastic. I brought my family here from Dallas, Texas in 2004 to take up a position at Vanderbilt, where previously I was at Bank of America, and I was a banking executive in the investment bank, and I had to go all over the world. So it was New York, San Francisco, Chicago, Atlanta, Tampa, you name a place, I was there. And I can, with all honesty, say that Middle Tennessee is the best place in the entire world that I've ever been. This is a beautiful place with beautiful people, extraordinary labor force, amazing infrastructure, and just a great place to have raised my 3 kids. We're all very fortunate to be a part of this wonderful, vibrant community. The other thing is I'm very, very shy. So all these things are extremely painful for me, and that's one of the reasons why I went into sales. I've had a bucket list of things I wanted to do. And one of the watchwords that I think we all need to take care of when you're specifically in a corporate sales role, how does a dude from Microsoft maintain some form of relevance to the people with whom we want to interact? I think it was, I can't remember if it was Mr. Soto or John, somebody was saying that the annoying sales guy who calls you and wants to get your time, well, I'm that guy. I want the time of the influencer and the decision maker, and Microsoft's sales strategy is a little bit different today because, I'm kind of bass-backward at that. We are reimagining Microsoft. You think of Microsoft, you probably think of Microsoft Office. Some of you may think of Clippy. Enough chuckles to know that, to know the Clippy reference. And you may have heard of a recently new operating system release. It's called Windows 10, and I'm going to tell you a kid joke. The reason why we couldn't name it Windows 9, because otherwise it would be Windows 7, 8, 9. We can't do that. I know, I want to hear that. My kids call it the dad jokes. So what we're trying to do today is MobileFirst CloudFirst. Now that's lovely. I'm a MobileFirst CloudFirst guy. How am I relevant to a CFO? How do I get into someone's office and have a conversation about mobile first, cloud first? And it goes to relevance. So let me go with something I placed out of sequence here. I need to demonstrate credibility. I have to have relationships just to get in the door. So I have to be relevant. And then my company wants me to do what, salespeople? They want me to close. I've got a pipeline. I carry a quota. I've never carried a quota, and this is something I've learned since I've been a salesperson. They call it carrying a bag in sales. It's the first time in my life I've ever carried a bag. And I have been on the other side of the sales cycle where I'm the one being courted. That's why I didn't start in LinkedIn until 2012. I didn't want any real presence out there because you do get a lot of salespeople hitting you up. So that's when I came onto LinkedIn, was in 2012. So this is the little eye chart I've got to tell my CIOs and my CFOs. I've got to say, look, devices and mobility, cloud and enterprise social, we're a whole new company at Microsoft. We have business intelligence. It's all in the cloud, mobile world, right? Although we've got 1.5 billion PCs out there, we're only 14% of the market today. We have to take a challenger attitude. We've got to get in front of people. We've got to generate sales. And one of the things that's coming down from Microsoft executives and our management, how do we get in front of business decision makers? We have great partners in IT, and the people in IT understand Microsoft very well, but the general consumer community, and this is evidenced by the artifacts I see in the room with the iPads and the Macs and things of this nature, the general consumer community have gone something different, where Microsoft executives now believe that we are only 14% of the market. We are a challenger. We are hungry, and we want you to know about this firm. Now, as a sales exec, going into these accounts, how can I make myself relevant? I want to tell you a couple stories how I used LinkedIn to do that. So I started crafting my presence in LinkedIn in July 2012, and I really encourage all of you, LinkedIn.com, Matthew Jet Hall, please friend me. I'm like Huddleston. I will immediately accept your request. I believe our marketing friends said that was responsiveness. So go ahead and hit me up there. I've been tweaking this thing for a long time, and sometime in March, 2 people from LinkedIn contacted me and said I had a really groovy profile. And they said that I'm climbing up the charts, right? And they just were talking to me about how because they were, and here's the irony, LinkedIn people were selling, I wish the LinkedIn people were here to correct me. I can't see them in the room. Where are you guys at? Didn't you promise me you were going to holler every time I said LinkedIn? Thank you. They contacted me and said, hey, we're trying to sell LinkedIn, thank you, to Microsoft. So if you would buy some LinkedIn, I love these interactive presentations. So these guys came in and said, hey, what are you doing? How can we help? How can you help us sell to Microsoft? And you know what? If they had called me on the telephone, I never would have took their call. But they contacted me inside of LinkedIn. I helped them navigate. I helped them get some pilots rolling inside of Microsoft. I provided that testimonial because they were very relevant to me. They were very relevant to our firm. And so I started that journey in 2012. I'm constantly tracking who's watching me. I want to see who's looking at it. It's good metrics. And this is one of my big things. And I love this stat sheet you guys have put together. Thank you so much for doing that. That is really amazing. And it's what we call that gamification of our social life, because now we feel competitive. So when I came onto LinkedIn in July, one of my colleagues at Microsoft also came in at the same time, and we had a race to 500 because for whatever reason, I don't know why LinkedIn, he's silent. He missed his cue. Thank you. I'm not sure why the LinkedIn caps that at 500 people, but we wanted to be the race to the 500 plus mark. So we had a race. I won it. And then in the context of doing that, I really honed my profile. And this whole 13 out of 99 relevance, you're ranked in the top 13% for your profile views, 26%. It actually makes you want to be in the top 12, the top 10, the 9. Metrics do matter. These things do matter. I think people do play that get to the next level. I really want to be in that top 10 of professionals like me. So good job there, guys, putting those insights out there. But I want to tell you a little bit about how I took that profile that I developed, and the CIO with whom I've spoke about this told me 2 things. He's very happy for me to use his name and his firm, but I cannot tell the stories about the person and people in this photograph. Does anybody recognize these folks? Spit it out. Who is it? Howard Stern does an interesting set of programming. I believe he's still on the air. I don't partake of it that often or at all, but some of you might. However, one of the things that I did when I started my cold calls, I had to go and introduce myself to people that I've never met. How am I relevant to them? Microsoft has a very 17.6 step sales process with artifacts that they generate. We have a product group, what's called the sales desk, where they have very groovy PowerPoints they do for you. And I mean, they are sharp. These are web designers and graphic designers who do beautiful art, and it's just a gorgeous process with a lot of smart people putting a lot of effort behind it. So I had the full force of the Microsoft Corporation behind me with all this information. But I kept saying to myself, I'm going to tell you the company. Have you ever heard of Food TV, HGTV? That's one of my clients. And they are, the name of the firm is called Scripps Network Interactive, and it is an amazing digital content company. They are brilliant. It's an extraordinary culture. I love those people. I really have a personal vested interest in their collective success. I don't know if you've ever experienced this. There was a movie years ago called Joe and the Volcano. Did you ever see that, the work environment the dude worked in, where he's in the basement and the lights? There's some people in here who may be living that right now. There's some people who don't. If you flip the exact opposite of that work environment, that is SNI. Those people are extraordinary. I'm a dude. Like I said, Tennessee's been good to me. I've had an extraordinary amount of experience. I've been able to be a professor, a CIO, a police officer. I got a list of things that the state of Tennessee has been able to give me. But I was never in media and entertainment. So how am I relevant with my background to a dude who is in media and entertainment? So, well, what do? I turn to LinkedIn to find out one human connecting factor. Turns out that the fellow, the CIO of Scripps, started on E! Entertainment Television. Turns out he was the producer of the Howard Stern Show for 5 years. And when I saw that, I walked into his office. His name's Bob Baskerville, and again, he said I can use a name, and he can tell me. He will also testify that it was very effective in breaking the ice and forging one of the best relationships I have amongst my CIOs. He had just come off an assignment running their international operations for Scripps, pushing that content out to a lot of different countries. And Bob, I'm saying, what am I going to talk about? So I sat down, hey, Bob, how you doing? We got the appointment. He took the appointment. I go into his office in Knoxville, and I say, look, I've got this fancy Microsoft pitch I'm supposed to give you. So if you would just acknowledge that we've given that. And he did. He said, now I got to talk to you about what I came to talk to you about. And he said, well, what's that, Matt? I said, I want to hear everything about the Howard Stern Show. So our hour meeting turned into about 3 hours of discussing things that I have been prohibited discussing publicly. But it's fascinating. He's an amazing man. And I can't remember which of the fellows said it. Was it John, about the personal connections? You know, what Microsoft sales training teaches you, and again, guys, I'm almost a trainee in many respects because I've never done sales before. Companies don't buy from companies. Who do they buy from? And that's the refrain, right? And I think that's almost cliche for a reason, is that I, at least during that discourse with Bob, I was able to humanize myself a little bit and say, Bob, you've got an immense background. You have something I really do have a sincere interest in. And I was interested in hearing those stories, and that was the basis for just a really incredible relationship that's blossomed and started. I've closed a lot of business there. I've aligned to their goals, and LinkedIn allowed me to do that. I'll tell you a secondary story, and this is didactic, I think, in two ways. One is, again, illustrating the power of LinkedIn, but two, illustrating, be careful. One of the ladies at Vanderbilt used to say, today the butt you're dissing, tomorrow you will be kissing. So you should probably be a wee bit careful about things as well. My old boss, I worked for another small firm called Koch Industries International. That's the largest common carrier pipeline oil and gas organization in the United States, second largest privately held company after Cargill in the U.S. as well. That may be different now since they acquired Georgia Pacific. So it's an amazing firm, and I worked for this dude for a couple years up in Wichita, Kansas. We both come from oil and gas. I came out of banking and finance, did a lot of trading floors, mergers and acquisitions work over in Europe for this guy. He was my boss up in Kansas. Now, he parts ways. I go back to Dallas, work in New York at Bank of America in the investment bank for about a decade, and then I moved to Nashville, Tennessee. Well, you fast forward to 2014, I also have a very large healthcare corporation that's under my account management at Microsoft. Turns out this guy is now the director of physician services there. I never would have known that had I not been on LinkedIn. And I was able to track that movement because, you know, we all move around. It's not a year, it's 10 years, whatever. Emails and phones disappear. We need some form of constancy. And that constancy was a platform of LinkedIn. How am I on time here? Good? Okay. So that constancy is very important. And that's another benefit of keeping your relationships in this space, because it really worked wonders. There's another set of kind of the network and relationship component, which also goes to something to touch on, which is research. So as you're looking for what people disclose, and this is clearly an act of public disclosure. One of the fellows that I was selling to, you know, you're trying to get in these accounts. This is a guy deep in the digital organization of a certain company that I would otherwise have had no access to. And very open source, very anti-Microsoft, very, you know, whatever his thing was. But one of the things I discovered through my research, which is always initiated on LinkedIn, every sales motion that I exercise at Microsoft starts on LinkedIn. Through the research, a lot of people disclose contact, their Twitter feeds, their blogs, etc. This fellow opened up the fact that he was a member of this application, which hitherto I had never heard of. And since you're going to the Flying Saucer, I bet you're going to see a lot of it over there. Do you use this thing? Untapped? Okay, this is Untapped. It's a beer tracking app. Well, you can Twitter this, and apparently this fellow loved beer so much, particularly India Pale Ale. I found this guy, and what we did was we created a cloud event at Microsoft up in Knoxville, around east in Knoxville. And I went down to the Carolina Ale House, set up an India Pale Ale event. I had a lot of people come into that event. This fella happened to be amongst them. Coincidentally, I must have appealed to something that he found interesting. And I also share that common passion, as you can see from my waistline, for India Pale Ale. So we did have something in common after all, and that commonality, wish I could tell you the numbers, but that commonality is going to pay great dividends as my children go to college very soon. So that is an extraordinarily important sort of lesson. And remember to treat people with dignity and respect as you go forward, because later on in life you will find them on LinkedIn again, and you'll be selling to them perhaps, or asking them for a job, as someone else will be talking about in a moment. So that was really the kind of the three things I wanted to talk about, and I don't want to belabor it, but I want to make sure that we maintain this idea of relevance. Microsoft's trying to get me to shift my discussion from IT to the business decision maker. How can the dude peddling Microsoft Office be relevant to a CFO, a CMO, a Chief Medical Information Officer, the people in the line of business where we think that over 60% of the financial decisions and sales decisions are actually going to be closed outside of IT. So you have to recalibrate where you think you're placing your sales efforts, because it's tougher. It's a microcosm. And again, one of the other presenters used the term gatekeeper. We do have the means by which we can provide relevance to these audiences and move them forward to hear our discussion. And I want to just recapitulate here. Credibility, how can I maintain relevance to the contact? I really don't want to waste anybody's time. I do carry a quota, there's no doubt about it. I'm not going to sell you something you don't need. My hope is that the reason why I went into sales was because I do love education, spending all the time I have at Vanderbilt. Consultative sales and education are synonymous. And if you can get into that space when someone and say, look, just let me tell my story. Let me show you what we offer at the competitive price point. We can have a dialogue, and then you can make a fully informed decision for your shareholders and the constituents that you serve. But let me tell my story, and I'll be relevant to anybody in that space. And that's my goal, is that relevance. The relationship is, I do have a sincere interest in people. I have been, as I said, very blessed in the state of Tennessee, and I love this state, and I love the people. And if I can find a way for our interests to align mutually, I want to help them. And I want to see them succeed. And I think that shows in the relationship. Sincerity, you can't use this data in a manipulative, negative manner. You've got to be sincerely interested in these folks. The information you use on LinkedIn, I hope you have the same real interest in it, not just use it as a trigger point to just get that contact and that opening. People will detect that. And alas, once I've established that based upon the launch point with LinkedIn, I can go in for the close. Because coffee is for closers. I don't want to belabor the point, Brian. Let me just cut it off there and see if you want to get moving. Is that good?